Why is the FAA so eager to violate you and hand out enforcement actions?
I'll get 'em.
Well, as I just found out, they're actually not. I found stats to back this up. Hey, it's Steve from Cleared Direct with my first video for the Pilot Network. I'm super stoked about this new partnership. So let's break this topic down into 3 sections. First, we'll look at where this notion came from that the FAA is the big bad wolf and what they've done to change their philosophy and image. And finally, a deep dive beyond the obvious about why this is a really good thing. For those of you who don't know me, I fly airliners, fighters, GA, both certified and assume home builts, and drones. Transitioning between those cultures is fascinating to me, and I'll talk a bit more just culture towards the end in part 3. But one common thread that I've noticed amongst all these cultures is a deep-rooted fear and disdain of the freaking FAA. So let's figure out why this exists. Earlier this year, I lost my engine in my Bonanza and had to ditch in a river. Luckily, we were able to egress, swim to shore, and sustained only minor injuries, but my beautiful V-tail was a total loss. Enter the big bad wolf and the NTSB. Fuck. Do I lawyer up? My livelihood depends on my pilot certificates. No kidding. While I was laying in my hospital bed not 2 hours after the crash, the nurse comes in and hands me a phone saying it was a family member on the line. I was caught off guard since our phones were lost in the plane and all my family lives far away. How the hell did they know? Well, it turns out it was actually the feds calling. Imagine the anger, adrenaline, the dread I felt. Obviously, I was going to give them factual information, but I sure as hell didn't feel comfortable in that moment expounding upon what I think may have happened. Fun fact, if you're on meds in the hospital after a crash, nothing you say is admissible. Now, for the record, I honestly hope and can't imagine that they'd lie to the hospital staff to get me on the phone. Hindsight, I'm sure there was some mix-up, but it sure felt sneaky in the moment. So how did the FAA earn this reputation? It turns out for a very good reason. Through 2015, the FAA handed out 10 times as many enforcement or legal actions as compliance actions. Their philosophy was, hey, we're a regulatory body, people's lives are at risk, you break a rule, we're going to roast you.
We follow orders or people die.
Why aren't pilots coming forward with lessons learned, sharing gotchas or there I was stories? The FAA failed to create and foster a just culture. Let's take a look at 2 terms I just brought up, enforcement action and compliance action. These are the 2 ways the FAA takes action after an incident or an accident if necessary. Enforcement action is a legal proceeding where the FAA pursues civil penalties, think of a traffic ticket or certificate action, that's the one that kind of scares me, and worse, criminal action. Compliance actions, on the other hand, are non-legal proceedings meant to achieve rapid compliance, to eliminate a risk or deviation, and to ensure positive and permanent changes. So this could look like on-the-spot corrections, counseling, and additional training, including remedial training. Sounds reasonable and way better than enforcement actions. So you're saying that the FAA over-relied on enforcement actions in lieu of compliance actions? Yep. Prove it. I like a skeptic. The FAA sent me this graphic and I've verified the numbers from the enforcement action database. It's pretty compelling. RT is remedial training, which is one arrow in their compliance action quiver. So how'd they make this shift starting in 2015? And more importantly, why the hell don't we know about it 5 years later? Well, we don't know about it because the FAA sucks at marketing. In related news, how they did it could put you to sleep. I'll try to hit the highlights. First, they came up with a sexy term, compliance philosophy. Now, in 2018, they made it even sexier by renaming it Compliance Program because it was so much more than a philosophy. They were taking action. They made a brochure, they made a PowerPoint. Now, I kid. Not about their marketing. It truly sucks. But they did take some serious action in making fundamental changes in how they do business and by rewriting FAA orders, which are essentially their operating procedures. For example, here's the no-kidding decision matrix on how they determine if compliance actions are appropriate. I'll link it below. Now, this whole discussion is limited to innocent mistakes. I'll quote, "Discovery of behavior indicating an unwillingness or inability to comply may result in enforcement action. Likewise, evidence that supports an intentional deviation, reckless, or criminal behavior or other significant safety risk would rule out an individual or organization as eligible for a compliance action." Translation, don't force our hand by being on drugs or knowingly doing something wrong. Okay, my big takeaway, Do your best to operate safely. If an incident occurs, know that the FAA has this program that now tries to avoid punitive action. Yeah, you may get an opportunity to visit your local CFI for some retraining, which can be humbling, but look at the alternative. Fill out your ASAP report. If or when they give you a ring, remember, they're trying to avoid enforcement action. Make it easy for them. Do me a favor and spread the word about this, since the FAA's efforts have clearly come up short. I was surprised and glad to learn about this. I hope we can all join the camp of sharing our experiences in order to prevent others from making the same mistakes. After my crash and before I learned all of this, I enrolled in AOPA's legal protection services and had a great phone call with an aviation lawyer. I would still recommend doing this if that makes you feel better. After a major crash like mine, I still think it was warranted and would do it again. If you want to learn more, I'll leave some more links in the description. Okay, this next section admittedly gets a bit philosophical, but I want to challenge you. I'm going to talk a lot about the Air Force and a little bit about the FAA, and then I'm going to tie it into my own personal experience flying GA. So no matter the level of organization that you're in, whether it's big or small or your own personal aircraft, try to pull these lessons learned on the just culture mentality and apply them to your own experience. So without further ado, on to the next section. All right, now the why. We've hit all the basics of why this is good, but let's dive right into the term just culture. I'm putting this here at the end of the video since all the need to know stuff has been covered. Those of you who are still hanging around, you get a gold star for getting into the cultural conversation. All right, let's take a look at the U.S. Air Force, which in my 21 years has matured and become a very just culture. The Air Force defines this as a culture which, quote, encourages personnel to provide safety-related information without fear of reprisal. Okay. It's also the foundation for an informed or woke culture, alongside reporting culture, learning culture, and flexible culture. So again, those four cultural traits comprise an informed culture, which resides under the promotion pillar of the aviation industry accepted SMS, or safety management system. So how do you build a just culture? Establish a just culture by encouraging hazard and error reporting for safety analysis and mishap prevention purposes. At the same time, they must understand and promote the idea that more can be learned through reporting and detailed investigation of safety issues than by assigning blame and punishment. Leaders must also establish clear guidelines on acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Commanders may not use safety investigation reports for any purpose except mishap prevention, while other investigations may be used as a basis for command disciplinary action as appropriate. Okay. Now, a key component of this just culture is safety privilege afforded to the DoD. Safety privilege is a promise of confidentiality to protect someone from punitive action for providing truthful information related to a safety investigation or a mishap. This is an important step in the investigative process to quickly and accurately determine cause and provide recommendations on how to prevent similar mishaps. In practice, we in the Air Force take this very seriously and have an annual training currency to ensure aviators understand how to protect this information and thus the privilege. This doesn't mean people willingly offer up gobs of helpful information right off the bat. Having conducted many aviation mishap investigations in the Air Force, I routinely have to coax info out of clammed up folks by reminding them of my intent and my limitations. It's not a get out of jail free card. There may be follow-up investigations with teeth, but now's not the time to lawyer up. So, coming primarily from this culture, I hope this explains why I wasn't entirely confident that the FAA would have this same mentality when they and the NTSB started investigating my Bonanza crash. That's why I enrolled in AOPA's legal services, but I didn't feel good doing this. I didn't want to lawyer up. I know that even if it was my fault, I wanted to know what happened, and I'm eager to learn and share and become safer as a community. For God's sake, as long as I wasn't criminally negligent, I'd be fine, right? Yeah, I think so.
Hey, thanks to the Pilot Network for sponsoring this episode. You know, a great network can be the difference between having the career we love or the job we need. For 30,000 plus members, the Pilot Network has reconnected old aviation colleagues, provided knowledge in the face of the unknown, and extended the helping hand to those coming up in this awesome career field. If you're a career aviation professional or interested in becoming one, don't hesitate to become part of one of the fastest growing networks for aviation professionals. It's truly my first stop when I have airline-related questions, from bidding my line to what's happening at other airlines to even grabbing a discount on a mortgage. Along with being a correspondent, I've also helped answer fellow members' questions about scoring a military pilot job. Also, the TPN podcast is one of my favorites to listen to. They get fascinating guests from all around the industry and ask thought-provoking questions. So visit TPN today at thepilotnetwork.com.